Hey, it's HP Munchcraft again. I am back to finish out the stats episode with Charlie, Sauron, and Ravsier, and I will pick up putting you back into the audio right where we left off, where we will be talking about HP and Undying. And I think I said in my Statbless video that I'd go over it sometime and then never did, but just very quickly to go over it, like at first it looks like it looks very very bad because it's just like these little piddly increases to your health pool and then that can be like chipped down or whatever, but if you notice on your elite guys, as you start adding more and more layers of defense on like these elves and you give them point buffs and whatever, all of a sudden your HP pool becomes, since it's become better and better protected, it starts mattering more because the enemy has to get through so many different filters and die rolls before they get to that HP pool. So on something like elves or sacreds that already have high stats, taking a lot of Undying and HP can help them out because essentially, especially with the Undying, it will help them trade better because all the time they spend, like without all their HP gone, without all their Undying gone, they will keep spending in combat and keep fighting. And it's not that like, oh, you lose them after the fight. That matters a lot less in Dominions, like what you lose after the fight, than actually winning the fight and then bagging the like remaining casualties when those that like combat mass starts tipping your way and you start getting surrounds and like deleting the rest of the enemy force, killing off all their fatigued mages. So just keeping your troops in the fight when building up that HP and Undying has a lot of defenses around it will help your guys trade with the enemy much, much better.
There's two things that come with HP and Undying. So I'm going to touch on the Undying first. So one, if you're a nature nation and you are using like stat troops, the bless or whatever, your mage is way more likely to heal your guys actually when they go under that threshold. So if you have like 10 Undying or something, and you're using N mages, specifically like N1 or lower, you're more likely to get healed to go off as well.
I'm sorry, did you say N1 or lower?
Sorry,
N1
or higher.
Lower. That's right, Rob.
N1 or higher.
I was a little concerned. I'm sorry, N1 or higher, so all of them?
Yeah, sorry.
N1 with mute. Kick ass.
My point is that heal is more likely to go off script, so your guys will get healed. The other side of it is increasing HP has another effect that a lot of people don't think about. That's your effective HP per square. So if you have three dickheads that are in a square that are normal human size, and you bump them all of a sudden up to like +7, let's say, you have 17 per guy in a square, and that's going to make that square even more likely to get buffs. So if you have like a nation that has like multi-size units, and sometimes one of your bastard troops is eating your buffs, well, he's all of a sudden not going to get his buff stolen if he has more HP per square because he has more HP now.
Though it does come with the downside that those squares are also more likely to be targeted by enemy spells. So this can be a downside of a stats build if you're running a bunch of Undying and then a bunch of stats or whatever and not many resists, which I do advocate for. But if you're doing that and then your enemy is one of those Farcaster freezing mist spells, like they are going to absolutely hone in on your sacred squares because you
especially sacred mages, by the way.
Right.
Who usually don't have any protection under a little bit.
Right. So just and
listen,
you can get around that, but that's just gotta be something you think of when you pile on the Undying is like, yes, now all of a sudden your buffs will start hitting your squares better, but the enemy mages are going to start preferentially targeting those same squares.
I want to comment on something you mentioned. So if someone's casting Farcaster clouds at you, that might be to your benefit because clouds are tricky to land, as our buddy here, Charlie, has learned
Yeah, that's true.
you can easily bait people who are casting clouds. Clouds, like cubes, are very tricky to actually pull off in combat. They're very, very good. But if you cast them before the line clashes, all of a sudden you've wasted so much fatigue on your mages. So it goes both ways. One, your stuff is going to get targeted more, but people might be like, oh, you took HP. That means my clouds are going to land on his face, and it's like, well, no, it's not that easy, right? So you could bait people who don't actually know how to use that good thing into wasting their time, which happens a lot in the minions. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah. I appreciate it, especially the baiting comment, because I don't think I brought that up, and that's one of the ways that, if you are the guy stacking the HP and your opponents are gonna preferentially hit you, then bring some big stupid idiot moron summon that has 60 HP and is totally worthless in a
You
square,
don't even need
and
to
then
do that.
they'll start hitting it, or you fucking bring some bears or an elephant or something.
Just do it the basic way. You just take you fill a square up with your sacreds, presumably they're being targeted, but just have 3 if you're size 2, and you just have them go first, and then all the targeting will focus them, because that's how the targeting works. They shoot at what's in range, not. Oh, it's like, but there's a bunch of them in the corner of the field. Your mages aren't going to be smart. They're going to be like, man in front of me cast.
Open fire.
That's why you want Maws of the Earth, because mages often don't have any prop.
No.
Yeah, but if they're not in range for the mages, because
Maws
your mages
of the Earth.
And that one is not armor negating like a lot of
And then, of course,
right?
now we're getting into playing Dominions. So then if you're on the other side and you see yourself getting fucking debated and the enemy's all deployed in one corner of the field.
Wait a minute. Speaking of targeting, I had something I did want to bring up related to stat. You might notice the one thing that stats do not actually protect you against is some sort of heavy or sharp object flying through the air at you at high speed. Mictlan, I would say, is perhaps the easiest nation in the game to just mindlessly take stats on. But that doesn't actually stop an arrow from killing your Eagle Warrior, right?
Yep. So
I will say that there's counterplay. I think that there is, and you can address it to an extent in your Bless. Particularly Undying, heavy Blesses on Mictlan, I think, have a better shot at dealing with that kind of thing. But that is to say that is, in theory, sort of a weakness of a Stats Bless compared to something like an Incarnate Bless, which could be buffing effective prod or regen or something else. So while they do help you in melee, there are sometimes weaknesses left open in being targeted by spells in the early game and being potentially things such as missiles or other forms of indirect damage like that, where you're not actually fighting what's doing the damage to you.
Stats are not about covering your weaknesses, usually. Occasionally they can be, and why don't we get into that? The one time I think that it's acceptable to use stats to cover your weaknesses is building up strength on elite but weak units. And you'll notice that in a lot of the game you'll have these elf pony mans where they'll have fucking 19 defense, and they'll have 14 attack skill or whatever, and they'll have a light lance. They'll be prancing about on their pony and no one can hit them, and then they've got 10 strength, and they are about as effective as a peasant with a pitchfork when it comes to actually hitting things. So
I view strength as almost a different category, though. So I'm agreeing with you, but
okay.
I think strength is always good. Adding damage straight up.
Right, but I do want to mention it because usually you don't want to build stats to cover a weakness because you're coming from a low base and you want to be coming from a high base when you build those stats, because of the way the bless gets more expensive the more you add to it. But I think strength is the exception because it's got 2 paths that it can build, and when you have an elite unit that is already good at fighting generally, but it can't damage anything, you really want to crank up that damage.
I mean, defense is kind of like strength, but you don't get as much across both paths because you have swiftness that gives you +1. But generally be
you wouldn't put defense on like a shard guard or something.
It's just generally, no.
Well, no. I disagree there. Shard guard are fucking just. Oh my god, I hate.
Guard or shard guard?
Which one?
MA
one?
MA Agartha is the shard guard.
They do have 11.
Dude.
Well, they're 11 with the buckler, so they're really 9.
Listen, +4 blood surge on shard guard are some of the most cancer annoying. I have tried killing these things, and so many when they have +4 blood surge, they are so infuriating to deal with. If you want to take a brain dead build on Agartha, that is the one you take. Play like absolute crap, and it does not matter because that sacred is so annoying. I am venting a little bit from my past drama.
It is.
It's great that I can give you PTSD.
Weirdly,
they're really good.
Has CR instead of being cold-blooded, unlike all the other Agarthans. So.
It's their weapon too. The shard glaive.
The shard glaive is a fucking
very fancy.
Amazing fucking weapon.
Their map is terrible, but when they're at your gates and you all of a sudden have to deal with the death stacking of whatever Peanut has masked all 8,000 of them, they're not very good.
You're like speaking about a literal specific game right now.
Listen, any kind of shard guard is you just spam so much shit because they can't actually kill enough shit.
Oh my god!
Put him to sleep the hard way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, he was in a fort fight. This is Sauron. He's saying like, also, here's what you do, and it's like one specific fight. It's like, okay.
Listen,
that do add 14 prot, so they're not that bad. They're not as bad as I thought.
Well,
I mean,
listen,
I would tell you to take larger and a bunch of attack skill and blood surge for the repel build, but that's what I told Johnny and lost him the tournament. So
what are you doing?
Don't ruin the square density.
Skill. Like, what are you doing?
That ruins the square density.
Well, I don't know. If you've never just used larger on them, Rob, they'll literally repel enough shit militia to expand with just larger.
Okay, yeah, but that's militia. Like, what are you going to do when somebody comes at you who saw this video and took stats on HP?
Well, then you're gonna have to cast Earthmeld and then just gouge their eyeballs out from the fucking ground. Like,
yeah, you know how much precision a golem crafter has?
I don't know, but I bet you'll tell me.
It's got 8. He's gonna hit his own guys with the Earthmeld.
Heard it here first. The real Agartha Statblesses precision.
Yeah. Listen,
they can't hit the broadside of the barn.
We're getting too off topic. Here,
right.
There's one more stat we have to talk about before we go off topic again.
Yeah.
The most uncommon stat that anyone will ever see, more uncommon than precision, morale. There is actually, I think, one case you want to run morale, and that is, I think, what was it? I think Arco said you take 4 or something, and you're pretty much immune to wailing winds.
It is, okay, no, it is, you build your morale up to 15 or 16 or more, and then wailing winds fear checks are at a severe disadvantage against you. Now, that doesn't make you actually immune to it, but you can morale stack your way past Wailing Winds. So that is a little bit of an advanced thing where if you're looking at who you're going to be fighting, and you're like, okay, I can beat all these people, except I don't have an answer for Wailing Winds, and it's going to wreck me in the late game, then stacking that morale up, which is 1 morale per point of fire, then that can be a counter. It'll also have the fringe benefit of just keeping your guys in the fight longer, so again, trading better and being more likely to win, so that's nice, but it is mainly I believe it is 15 or 16 being the break point where you start being at a, like, good advantage versus Wailing Winds checks. I think Wailing Winds is rolling from like a 10 or 11 base, and so you start getting up to like a 75% plus chance of succeeding your morale checks against it.
It's tough because like it's competing with attack skill.
But it's more for mage blesses, if anything.
I did also want to say, Wailing Winds, I believe it can actually reduce your morale.
It can, but that's also another roll, I believe.
Like
fear is poorly understood, but they are rolling dice behind the table somewhere with it.
Wailing Winds,
it sounds nice until some idiot brings out their Vamplore that they spent 30 turns getting just a combo with Blood Rain, and then it doesn't matter anymore.
Well,
listen, listen. Oh, actually, I just lost my meme. I was gonna say Wailing Winds is broken, then something else, but I lost my thought.
It is broken. Thank you, Sarah. Don't worry, they're nerfing it.
No, I would have mentioned this because it's the other combat stat, which is even more niche and basically only useful for goofy stuff. When you build swiftness, you are building combat speed.
Oh, you're talking. Oh, the race card. Okay. All right. So, for those of you who don't know why swiftness is significant here, so technically there exists a stats build where you take 2 to 3 swiftness plus a bunch of strength, and on cavalry specifically with their lance attack, the first attack can explode based on the combat speed.
Squares, yeah.
That's not a build. That's some goofy shit Rob tested.
Listen, it might.
Have you ever wanted to hit somebody for plus 72?
Well, hold on. That was multiple stacks of swiftness, then buffing with quickness, strength buffing, enlarging, and then sending the cap.
I'm trying to find it.
It had a million things on it, and then he just 72 damage lance, and just take down a Titan.
I remember what I was gonna say. So for all of the talk about stats, really, what you want to do is, if at the very least, go to the manual. You find the DRN chart, and that will give you like a good idea.
The DRN chart is not in the manual. That is misinfo. The DRN chart is on the IlWiki.
Oh well, there's one on the IlWiki, and I think Winter does provide you one because I'm pretty sure I got this.
IlWiki describes DRN, but I don't know if they give you.
They tell you what it is. They do not give you a probability chart.
I'm pretty sure they give you one.
I have not seen one in the manual.
Because where else did I get? I'm pretty sure I got my original screenshot from the manual. One sec.
Maybe.
So I'm pretty sure they provided one, but it was still not accurate. Regardless, you want to go to the IlWiki.
Winter, please.
Winter, please update your manual.
So just go to the wiki for the DRN, and that's going to give you the math breakdown of like, oh, why are we saying +4? Well, if you're +4 against someone, according to this outdated manual one, that's like you're at a 18% chance to hit that guy if it's defense skill. Or on the opposite end, if you're +4, you're 76% chance to land. Right. So like these numbers, they have break-off points where in that 4 range, they're really good, but once you hit like 5 and 6, like, you're only going up by 8%, 4%, 5%, then it's not as effective. So in my opinion, like, you want to take enough stats where you hit this threshold, especially with your chassis, and then you don't care about, the other, hitting +6 or whatever. It doesn't matter because it's such a lower chance base compared to, going from 3 to 4 or not 3 to 4. Going from base 0 to 4 is almost 30%.
So I want to expand on that a little bit, like to just summarize like the whole stat res thing. When you see like a bunch of people taking like 3 rainbows across the board, and they get like 1 in every stat or whatever, because sacred units typically have higher stats than normal infantrymen, they are going to be hitting those thresholds against indies and then being able to expand, and that's one of the reasons why that 3s across the board bless has gotten so popular. Is it's very fucking cheap, and you can expand against indies, and then you get resists later on. And then you spend the rest of your points on fucking scales or something because you have 1,000,000 points left over because it's so fucking cheap on the Rainbow Mage. But if you have elites, and then you're facing the enemy's elites, who is probably doing that rainbow shit or doing something else in their sacreds, then taking the heavier stat blesses means that you will be hitting your thresholds against them, and then they are about as likely to hit you as indies are to hit them, and you just fucking roll them every game.
Freeland, Lulu.
Yeah.
So it does matter though, but I definitely am not in favor of like there's certain players on Ruby who are like, oh yeah, I go 9 fire and 9 water because I want to get even more stats.
That was literally just Emmy Deer, I think, and
I haven't taken that build before. I am offended.
What? Listen, I think the +6, the 6 water and like the 3 air and 6 fire is like your sweet spot for like attack and defense. I don't recommend going to 9.
Yeah. I don't recommend going to 9, but it was absolutely Chad-like and very hilarious when the Almish Steel Warriors went and started like beating down Wind Riders and just clobbering, just bum rushing an Arco, which shows you the power of stats. Even though that's like a heavier investment of stats than any of us in the call would take. Like, yeah, something you can't just take.
I don't think you can say that.
You have taken it? Okay, then any of us.
I think on a Micklin I've taken that before.
You can absolutely just yoke up some like random human sacred with like slightly elite stats to where they're just like auto hitting elf cav and just like clobbering through things that cost 3 times their gold, and just going nutso on them. And your scales are all in the dumpster, but that's the price you pay.
When it works, it's beautiful. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
With heavier stats in the +4, I also feel like you can take a lot of the positive scales. You might not be able to go, 3 luck, 3 growth, and then have your troop scales, but.
So I wanted to say this earlier, but I think I'll say this now. I think there's a really potentially viable kind of middle road, especially on human sacred nations like Ulm, maybe EA Ulm or Late Age Marignon or something, where you just take attack, skill, strength, magic weapons with an immobile, and you have almost perfect scales. You can get really close. It's
you're
not a heavy investment.
You can basically take all the scales you need and want on a nation. You're not going to be perfect scales. You're probably going to be dumping misfortune. But...
No, I mean, let's consider. You can probably run a monolith and take, I don't know, 5 or 6. You probably won't. You won't be perfect, but you'll be like plus.
Oh, like an oracle, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. No, even a monolith. You take strength, magic weapons, attack skill.
Right.
Maybe throw in some PR and HP or something. Probably run +6 or 7 scales. At least dump 10. Yeah. I mean, you're looking pretty good at that point.
Yeah. Not perfect, but pretty good.
I think there might be more to this. So normally, like when we're talking about taking these blesses, like most of us are dumping luck and we're dumping temperature to afford these scales.
Or at least I am. Oh, I am at the point, I am so degenerate, I will dump growth before dumping temp in a lot of cases.
Interesting.
Yeah, because if you've ever looked at it, temp dumping, while it does mitigate with seasons, temp dumping, temp is the straight up most negative money off the bat scale to dump. It is -5% per. That's the equivalent of an order and a prod scale, I believe. But
that's the equivalent of an entire enemy MA success to minion candle.
Jesus. But yeah,
it's funny.
Whatever. That's a topic for another day. But
I was actually talking about how kind of mindlessly dumping temp recently with actually Johnny is probably like an interesting point because it's such a heavy such a heavy modifier. So maybe the reason why everyone dumps temp is maybe because of
mitigated by seasons.
Yeah, it's mitigated by seasons.
You can't go past like 3, whatever, so you're not losing as much value.
There is another reason. For heat specifically, particularly in the late age, there's some really spooky cold nations. That's to a lesser extent in the other ages, but you also get better movement year-round.
Yes. And people fear certain nations. They're like, oh, I need to take cold to fuck Satis. I need to take heat to fuck Atlantis. Like,
I would not want to pick full cold 3 late-age man and then start next to an Atlantis.
Right. So people
that would not be a good time.
People look at these scales, but they generally look at the cold scales like first or second when it's time to dump something. But if you actually look at that massive just spring and fall negative 15% income from triple dumping a scale, you just start retching. It's like
well, that's what I was trying to say. I feel like maybe some of the misinformation outside of like the metagaming versus certain nations, like I think some of the math that was provided in 2017, 2018 kind of gave everyone in the community at the time like the false presumption that, oh, you're gonna be in deep summer at these turns anyways, and like you're gonna lose that income no matter what, so it's a free scale to dump, especially if your nation is preferred 1 or 2 in this direction. It's like an easy dump. And maybe that's true for those nations that are preferred heat or whatever, or preferred cold, but I still think you do lose a shitload of money. So maybe coming back to that and not just mindlessly dumping it could be a good conversation for people to think. Or it could be something you should think about and not just like, oh, I need to dump this because how else am I going to afford my build?
So I want to bring up a fringe benefit of stats, and I know I'm pivoting, but I want to get us back to it. But a fringe benefit of stats is that it will make some of your absolute dogshit terrible sacred summons suddenly useful. And what I'm thinking of right now is the Kushi, because due to their low prot and like just having a bite attack and being a dog who is dog, they've been overlooked because they're just kind of mediocre. But when you get stats, which as Tirnanog, your sacreds benefit a lot from stats, like your recruitable Tuatha warriors benefit a lot from stats. Once you take stats, they're up at 15 and 16 if you're +4 or whatever. And so all of a sudden, they are now in that elite zone against regular infantrymen, like regular PD and militia. So all of a sudden now, instead of being this kind of like, well, you can take them for patrolling and siege value unit, they're a stealthy raider with no upkeep that you could just put on one of your 160 gold guys, and then 160 gold and 6 gems is going to be way cheaper than any raider thug that you could put together. And it's still going to take the Indy provinces with your guy just blessing them and sending them in. Does middle-aged man have Kushi as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So while man is not an ideal circumstance for a stat bless on the Lord Wardens because they're too resource intensive to really expand with, putting a 25 gold monk with 6 gems, which is 7 Kushi, and then that being able to take provinces, if you did take a stat bless on middle-aged man, you'd have possibly the most efficient raider to ever exist in Dominions.
Actually, HP, there was a competition on Lucid's thing. I don't know what they eventually got, but there was something cheap that semi-reliably took 6 PD.
I stopped.
I think actually it was reliable. It was pretty stupid.
Listen, stop telling people to snipe man before I have my man stats build too.
You don't want 134 combat speed, dog.
Just wait till Dominion 6 because they're planning on breaking man. Hold on.
I think man is really interesting.
I think
allegedly.
Marignon is going to might be an issue, depending.
We'll see how broken it is. Listen,
we'll see what survives to the end of the game. None of us are beta testers, by the way.
So apparently, the most effective way to kill 19 PD in the game is you play MA Nazca, you make 2 Macemen, and then you snipe rear with the commander.
Oh, yeah.
And it costs you 90 gold.
Yeah, Rav. Yes, but like realistically, like if someone sees you do that once, they're gonna not.
Hopefully, it never happens.
Wait, right. HP. You say that, but I've had 2 flyers in our recent game. They were just with my raiding group. I bumped into someone's counter raiders and sniped 2 mages with 2 Zots. 2 mages.
Well, that's oh god.
All I'm going to say is that my most recent games have given me a great appreciation of how OP flying is as a mechanic. Flying OP.
Listen, flying is really fun to mix into counter raiding.
And if you have a horror harmonica golem just running around terrorizing armies, and then one army has an undisciplined flyer in it, and it pings it back instantly.
Yeah, get out of
that's here. The army that survives. Like, come on, guys. Clearly, flying is OP.
Yes. People don't actually utilize things that well.
All right.
I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one last thing I did want to mention.
All right, yeah, go for it, Rob.
So it's technically not a stats bless, but the application of it is as a stats bless most of the time.
All right.
The Berserk bless gives you +2 strength and attack. It also gives you unbreakable morale, which is kind of like a stats bless. You know, if you could give 90 morale to from the fire path.
Plus, that is an incarnate that just happens to give you stats. It's like quickness.
Well, I mean, come on.
Quickness gives you +2 attack and defense. It's not a stats bless. It's
just but also doubles your attack rate, right? But whereas Berserk, it gives you 90 morale, right, and then it gives you 2 attack and strength, right? That's a stats bless.
Touch of madness, please.
So just before the episode ends, I want to take the opportunity to just rag on the resist bless more, especially the like 333 all res or 33333 stat res like Rainbow Pretender, just because like we mentioned earlier why people take that, but I think really why people, when you break it down to it, why people take that is Dominions players are lazy and they're scaredy cats. And what that does is it means that your precious sacreds are now immune to a bunch of stuff with just blessing them, and you don't have to think about countering what your enemy's mages do. You just bless them with their resists, and all of a sudden they're nice and safe from the big scary thunder strikes or whatever. And so I think, like, as you develop, while there are metas and there are reason to take a lot of these resists, like, as you develop as a Dominions player, you need to come out of your shell a little bit and not just take the, like, easy default that you just paint on, and then you don't have to worry about who's casting what spells, but then you just lose your first war because somebody, like, earth melds you or hits you with nets or something, and your sacreds just all die because they don't have any combat stat. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the issue is that people overstate, like, oh, if you take losses in X war, you're behind. And so people, like, get under the presumption that they can't lose their troops, or if they start losing their sacreds or whatever, that it's, like, this big deal. But as long as you win that first war, buddy, who cares if you've lost the first 10 turns? Just make them again. You know, it certainly is better if you win your war and you take as little losses as possible. But that doesn't always happen in Dominions, especially as the people you're playing against get better.
Yeah, your opponents are trying to play the game too, at least we hope.
Yeah,
true.
People aren't just AI that you have to kill in your game, although some play like the AI. That doesn't mean everyone in your game is going to be an AI. So don't go under that presumption. You can't have the false presumption that you have to maul over the first player, and if you don't have, like, the sacreds surviving, then it's the end of the world. Just accept your troops are going to die, accept your sacreds are going to die, accept your mages are going to die. Everything in Dominions is, you know, something can happen. Random arrow hits your guy in the dome. He decides it's bleeding everywhere, and now he's gone. Like,
everybody's laughing. Everybody's laughing until your Draken walks up to a blood slave, he gets uselessly kicked, and starts bleeding profusely.
Dude, my favorite happened to me. My favorite thing that happens is like I'll be playing D or and someone will be using jank, and literally a militia fucking pokes their like jank ass thug that is like 10 gems or whatever, and it just profuse bleeds and dies on 1 to 6 PD. Like this shit happens. The Minions is a game of RNG, except that your stuff is gonna die, or you might, or you're gonna lose yourself in the game, even like to a larger extent. Like you do lose in the game and you do win, and that's okay. The point of playing the game is to enjoy yourself and have a good war, hopefully, and that you enjoyed the battle, and then you go to your next game if you lose. Don't quit when you start losing, but shit happens.
I think that's a good place to end. Does anyone have anything final they'd want to say on stats?
Take all stats, don't take res.
Yeah, stats.
I think my final point, if you'll give me a minute here, I think I would probably still favor certain reses with a higher stats build as I go about this game. Maybe everything's going to change on 6, but I think like certain reses for what they're worth are worth taking and versus just taking them blindly. I definitely think CR is the most dog, and PR could be very useful, but FR and SR sometimes are valuable. Maybe I'm kind of torn on SR, but FR, when your stuff just dies to fire shield, kind of sucks if you have full stats. Watching all your elites run into a fire elementals and burn to death because they bop the shit out of the fire elementals does suck. So I think that they're
on weapons.
Well, yeah. So there's certainly value on taking certain reses depending on your chassis. You just have to think about it and not just brainlessly take something. And your reason behind taking whatever build is why not? You got to think a little bit harder of like, okay, this is what I'm doing in the game, and this is how we're going to play around the stuff. And I'm aware that, of the nations in my game, a bunch of them have fire magic, or a bunch of them have air magic, and maybe it's more valuable in those situations to take those res, because that's a real concrete
thought. Saying the all stats, no res is more of a metaphor than just something that should be your game plan every time?
I mean, very deep. You could take it as your basis for your build, certainly, and then go from there. But you should adapt your build based on, 1, your game, and 2, what you're going to do.
Yep.
And maybe thinking about that might sound like too much work, but it could go a long while if you're playing a game for 3 to 4 months.
Well, if I might butt in as well. When it comes to thinking about what you want to do, I would say that is, in my opinion, that is coming up with a build that you want to try. That's one of the most fun things in doing, right? Like I've sat here, I've probably made, I don't know, at least 50 different pretenders for Joman, and some of them actually had meaningful differences from each other too.
Holy shit!
Right?
Yeah.
So I would say, while we are championing stats quite a bit in this particular episode, don't feel pigeonholed that you have to try it if you necessarily don't want to. You should go out there, find a build that you think looks fun to play, give it a test maybe, see if it'll expand and if it's actually fun to mess around with, and just play whatever you have fun with. I would say stat builds are some of the most fun in the early game because they let your Sakers just walk wherever they want. Like it gives you so much freedom, just right-click into people. It's a really fun kind of play style, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
So, like, at the end of the day, don't feel like you have to always take stats because it's meta or it's try-hard or whatever. You should play what feels fun to you. I spend almost no time, honestly, worrying about how meta my build is compared to how much fun I'm going to have trying it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the approach.
Part of the experience is experimenting and figuring out stuff on your own, for sure.
All right.
Yeah, the most important thing about any build is as long as it can expand, it doesn't matter. If you can expand, you're good. Run whatever. You don't have to run any build. Just make sure you can expand so you can actually play the game.
Thanks for joining us on the All Stats No Res podcast. Join us next week. We currently don't have an episode topic quite yet. but we're going to get it figured out. And as always, this is Articulatimus, HP Munchcraft, Sauron, and Rob CA. See you guys next time.